Judging by the title of this video, you might think this is a video about doom and gloom, but it's not. It's a video about reality based upon history and some personal experiences I'll share with you. And I believe we've come to a point that is long overdue. The system is in trouble right now. The system is very uncomfortable. You've got such a large percentage of young adults who are healthy, able-bodied, perfectly capable, who are not contributing. And this is getting ready to lead to global, worldwide havoc because it threatens the system. Has nothing to do with the geopolitical forces. You're seeing in the news right now what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine, etc. I believe we're going to be involved, and it has nothing to do again with geopolitical forces as much as it does that the system is currently not working to its capacity, and those involved with overseeing the running of the system are concerned because life and existence entirely as they know it is changing greatly. It is threatened. They don't like it. So what's going on? Currently, 50% of all U.S. adults under the age of 30 are living at home with their parents. Many of them, a large percentage of those folks, aren't even employed. They're not working. And it's not that they've given up looking. They never started. There are more jobs available out there right now than there probably has been in the last decade, perhaps 2 decades, coming out of the Great Recession, which was a decade past now. And nobody, or at least I don't want to say nobody because that's not an accurate statement. There are few people taking advantage of this situation. I was speaking with someone in the know, very knowledgeable man here not long ago, who was talking about the point that there are jobs out there right now that are vacant, that need filled, that 10 years ago, if you didn't have a bachelor's or a master's, there was no sense even applying for those jobs or submitting a resignation because you weren't even going to be considered. But because of the great lack of younger millennials and older Gen Zers putting themselves out there into the workforce, you can have a high school degree and work ethic and go out there today and get jobs that 10 years ago you wouldn't have even been considered for, which would pay you an income higher than probably anything you've ever earned, speaking to people in their late 20s, mid-20s, whatever. But they're just not doing it. They're not doing it. They have no desire to do it. So how does this translate to things are going to get bad and then they're going to get worse and then they're going to stay there for a while? Well, let's look at history and let's look at the system of capitalism as a wheel for just a moment. And every spoke in that wheel plays a very intricate and equally important part, okay? Those spokes are there to keep the integrity of that wheel intact. When the spokes start disappearing, that wheel becomes threatened. It'll still go around and around until enough spokes are missing on one side of the wheel or in various parts of the wheel to where the wheel starts to collapse. And without those spokes, the wheel will collapse and the system will cease to exist, the system of that wheel. So, of course, what do? Well, you see that you're losing spokes or spokes are missing. You've got to do something to make repairs, right? Well, that's what the powers that be. And this is not about conspiracy. I am not a conspiracy theorist. None of this is just reality. This is how things work. And if we look back through history, at any time in which we've been in a similar situation as this in our society, what's happened? We've gone to war with somebody. I remember this is something there was a seed planted in my head in the 90s, early 90s, just before the big boom times of the 90s. You remember that with the dot-com craze? You could have thrown a dart at a board with stock symbols on it and gone out and bought whatever stock symbol you hit with that dart and made money. I mean, those were amazing times. I remember during those times speaking with a man at the time who was in his early 90s, and he was a businessman before he retired, and he was a World War II veteran. He worked on the Manhattan Project, as a matter of fact. And I remember talking to him, and he died shortly after this. This was the last conversation I had with this man. He said that a massive downturn was... No, that's not even how he worded it. He said, there's only been one other time in my life when I've seen times this good. And I said, well, when was that? And he said, the Roaring 20s. He was a child during the Roaring 20s, and teenager even. Yeah, because this is 1990s, and he was in his 90s, so he was born like right around the year 1900. So in the Roaring 20s, he would have actually been in his 20s. So he'd have an even better memory of this. And then he said, well, you know what happened after that, though, right? And I said, well, what? He said, the party was over. We went through the Great Depression, and times were bad for a long time. Of course, then until we entered World War II, which, of course, led to the booming economy again that would last for a very long time until the 70s, of course. Late 60s, 70s, things started dropping. Well, what happened then, of course? Well, we got involved in Vietnam. Then we had the Roaring 90s. The War on Terror stopped all that, and then we stayed in the War on Terror for more than 20 years. There are people alive today that up until, well, we can't even say that. There are young Generation Z folks alive today who, from the time they were born until now, this nation's been at war. I mean, we would like to be able to say that, well, no, because the current guy in the White House took us out of Afghanistan, so we're not at war. Well, a couple days ago, as of this recording, that guy watched the leader of ISIS blow himself up via satellite television or whatever in Syria during a special operations raid. No, the world is not at peace, and no, we are still out there at war, and I do believe things are going to get worse in regard to what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and it has nothing to do with geopolitical reasonings. It has to do with the spokes in the wheel, and the spokes aren't doing their job. One of two things are going to happen. Actually, no, this is my theory. Come back and see me in 5 or 6 years and say, OMG, they said you were crazy, but it turns out you were right. And this is overdue. And I'm going to quote a man called Alan Greenspan. Who remembers Alan Greenspan? Head of the Federal Reserve back in the 90s, first part of 2000. He said during those times, he was talking about, and this is when the economy was good, times were booming, this is before 9/11, September 11th attacks. He said the big threat that the system, the economic system faced going forward was that there were not going to be enough spokes to spin the wheel. Those were his exact words, ironically, because I'm out here talking about spokes in the wheel today. His concern at the time was that there were so many baby boomers retiring. Baby boomers, of course, having been, up until Gen Z, the largest generation in American history. I was a stockbroker in the late 90s, and I went to all these financial seminars and all that stuff, and I listened to a guy give a presentation once about the baby boomers, about how they dictated the economy throughout the course of their life. And he put up a slide, and he showed like the best-selling or the best performing corporations stock-wise, like if you were to buy their stocks, over the course of the lifetime of baby boomers. And he started going back into the 40s or the 50s, and it was like Procter & Gamble had this great year, just from out of nowhere. Procter & Gamble had a great year. Why is that? Well, because they made baby food. And there were so many stinking baby boomers out there and all these parents buying the food to feed them that, the parent companies like Procter & Gamble and other parent companies of baby food just went crazy. Then through the 60s, you had Whammo. As the baby boomers grew up and became adults, the automobile industry boomed. You remember Chrysler almost went under. The baby boomers just out there buying cars, along with the great leadership of Lee Iacocca, brought that company back. And then we saw the trends all the way through retirement and even afterward. If you had bought pharmaceutical stock over the last 20 years, you would have done really well as the baby boomers aged and began to get on medication for conditions that come with age, higher cholesterol, blood pressure, whatnot. Well, the baby boomers are kind of out of the game. There's still a lot of them that are working. But as Greenspan saw it, and what we're seeing now, the supply chain, so to say, not the one that's completely broken because of COVID, but the supply chain of worker bees coming in to take over, it's not there, it's empty. Half of adults under 30 right now are still living at home, and many of them are not just not working out there being a spoke in the wheel, they're not even looking. Now, historically, what's happened at times like this is we've gone to war somewhere. We've gotten involved somewhere. I mentioned the 90-some-year-old man and what he said. I actually started thinking about him because it was his son who used to say something in the early 90s that stuck up here that I've kept my eye on for 30 plus years, and I'm seeing it now today. It was this man's son, the 90-some-year-old man's. His son was 60-ish at the time. And the man would say we needed a good war. We need a good war because we were kind of going through a period of stagflation there before the boom of the 90s took off. And this stuck out with me because this man was anti-war. He was, if you want to pigeonhole him politically, we can say he was a, left-wing extremist. He was a college professor, okay? Enough said. And he taught history and he understood history. And so I would ask him, I would say, you hate war. You're totally like anti-war. And he would say, yeah, I am. He said, if war started, I'd be one of the first ones up in D.C. with my sign protesting. Ooh, whatever. Well, I'm so intimidated. You're going to get a sign and protest. Okay. The point of this is this. He hated war. He knew there was no reason for us to go to war, but he saw a war coming because of stagflation. And he talked to me a little bit about economic history and about how one of America's favorite go-tos during times of stagflation or deflation or any sort of non-booming economy is war. All right, so here we are. Considerable portion of young men and women in their primes, able-bodied, able-minded, not even looking for work. And we've got a powerhouse in Europe, backed by a powerhouse in Asia, getting ready to invade a country. We've already sent troops to several countries to jump in on the side of the small, the invaded. I honestly think it's going to happen because, as that college professor said back in the 90s, we need a good war to get this economy going. Now, I'm going to talk about some experiences, some things I saw with these eyes in this place. This is why I wore this hat today, a little souvenir I came home with, along with some PTSD and a chronically inflamed lower lumbar, tinnitus, a couple other things, whatever. It's best I've forgotten them. Don't let any of it keep me back, hold me back. I get out here and do what I want. war profiteering. Okay, you think of, the government or through subcontractors and all this stuff, making all this money in war. I mean, those missiles alone cost millions and millions of dollars. We've got fighter jets now that cost billions and billions of dollars. But listen, it doesn't stop there. It's the very, I would say, smaller, more minuscule parts you don't see is the reasoning behind going to war to, I guess, give a big old steroid injection to our economy when it lags. The things I learned about how one can participate in war profiteering as a small guy while I was in Iraq will blow your mind. Some of it might come across at first as simply appearing to be taking advantage of a bad situation. What do I mean by this? Well, here's what I mean by this. When we were in Iraq, when we weren't out on mission, which was rare, we might get a period where we'd get a day or two off. Well, our leadership wanted to make sure we didn't become complacent, and I totally get that, because when you become complacent, you let your guard down, you end up dead. You're just going to get killed. I wouldn't have minded some rest, though. But our leadership kind of determined not only were we not going to become complacent, but we weren't going to get any rest. So on those days when we were off, which were rare, they might have been once a month or something, they would make sure that we were scheduled all day with some sort of stupid training program. Training, whatever. And I remember we were taking a course one day on, and I can't give specifics and details here due to OPSEC, operational security, but it had to do with the Blue Force tracking system, BFT we called it. Which was a computer system inside our gun trucks, which allowed us to stay in contact with the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, back in the Green Zone, and with each of the other trucks, and we could look on there and see where other gun trucks were. We could, and I'm going to stop right there. We could tell a lot by that little screen in the middle of our truck. We had a class one day where we got to learn some of the other really neat stuff we could do on the Blue Force tracker, and it was being taught by a man probably 40 at the time. I was in my early 30s, well, mid 30s. I joined late. I was probably 35. I turned 35 in Iraq. This guy would have been about 40. He was just a little bit older than me. I like the guy. You could hear a bit of a southern accent in his voice, and he conducted himself as if he was former Army. I just started small talking with him during one of the breaks, and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I told him, and it turns out this guy liked to ride motorcycles. He had a Harley Davidson, and he liked to go on long trips. I'm talking, he would. In October, when the leaves were changing, he would go all the way up the East Coast from wherever he started in the South, North Carolina or whatnot, up to Maine and back just to see the leaves. And it turns out he had actually driven his motorcycle right through, areas in which I'd lived, where I'd grown up. And you make a connection like that with somebody 5,000 or 6,000 miles away from home in a place where it's 130 degrees Fahrenheit every day. No kidding. When we left, it wasn't like that every day because we were there during the winter, and it only got up to 90 during the winter. Got cold at night. It was desert, high desert, and you just feel like you've found a nugget of gold when you're talking to somebody in a crap hole place like that who knows anything about where you're from, and you can relate to a degree. So I would talk to him throughout the day when we'd take breaks, and he mentioned to me something to the effect of, we could stay in touch, and if you'd like to do what I do, when you ETS, which means exit time and service, get out of the military. Guys, I think we got company. You watch behind me here. I'm detecting movement behind me. He says, I could hook you up. I could maybe help you get on board where I'm working. And see, this was during the Great Recession. When I came back to the U.S. after my time spent in Iraq, there were no jobs. And I had a heck of a hard time. And whatever, there was lots of scenarios there, but that's around the time I ended up going back to the Philippines and staying over there for about 5 years straight before coming back here. And things working out for us. I just saw I heard something, and then I saw an entire flock of birds fly away. That only happens if there's something out there. So you keep getting my 6. So I was talking to the guy a little bit about it, and I thought, well, I heard that too. That might not be a bad idea. I said, look, let's just cut right to the chase. I want to know, like, what I'd get paid, like how much money do you make? And he said, I'm not going to tell you that. I don't answer that question. I learned not to answer that question. I learned the hard way. And I said, well, how did you learn the hard way? And he said that he used to tell people when they would ask, if he would talk to somebody and kind of wanted to help them maybe get on board doing what he was doing. And he said he had a soldier spit in his face. Said he had an E6 staff sergeant chewing tobacco at the time. He told him how much he made. He said he spit in his face, called him a maggot, and turned around and walked out and didn't even go back to class. And there's something back there. I don't think we're alone. But you know how I roll. I have a very unique method. I don't look. I let you look because they can tell when you're looking. So I'm going to look in the opposite direction. You just keep getting my 6, huh? And I got it. I mean, I wouldn't have spit in a guy's face no matter what he said the number was. But I know I would have felt rankled because we were towards the end of our deployment over there, going on 4 hours of sleep a day, going out on mission every night, people trying to kill us. Everybody back home who could take advantage of us while we were away did. Clean out the bank accounts, sell the vehicles, take the kids, move so far. I mean, my story is common among soldiers. Okay, it's not uncommon. Just so you're over here fighting a war, trying to stay alive, trying to figure out what you're going to do when you get back to no house, no car, no family, and then here's a guy who's over there working in an air-conditioned environment, putting in maybe 2 to 4 hours a day of work is it. And I sensed he was making about $180,000 a year. The first $80,000 of which was tax-free because he was earning it on foreign soil. And he didn't tell me that. I found that out later. But he did tell me that on one of his previous deployments, his wife left him, took the kids to a different state. Some of us had them, whatever, different story for a different time. He had nothing back home, and the way he saw it is he could go over there, stay in Iraq for 5 years, not spend any of his money, come home, still be relatively young, in his early 40s. I'm 48 now. When he came back after his 5-year plan, he would have been younger than I am now, and he would have been set for life. He would have never needed to work again if he didn't want to. Now, is that war profiteering? Well, that's taking advantage of a bad situation. He did his time in service. He served in the capacity of a soldier. And I guess it's like, hey, you can be over here going through all this for $38,000 a year, or you can go over here and work 2 or 4 hours a day, not have to put up with the rigmarole of being a soldier and putting up with all the rank structure and all that, and make $180,000 a year. It was pretty much a no-brainer. So that's an example. But then it also, from there, you notice how quiet it just got? So anyway, you start noticing things, you start talking to people. When I was in Iraq, I know that the U.S. government was spending $1 million a week on soda pop alone for the chow halls for Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, somebody was on the other end of this, receiving those $1 million worth of sales every week, boosting their profits. I remember meeting an E5, a sergeant, who was ETS, and as soon as he got home, he was so excited. He was a cook. He'd been over there for a year. He had made contacts in the chow hall. He was so excited because he told me he was going to secure a contract selling hot wings. to the DOD for chow halls. Hot wings. He was a chicken farmer, brought up on a chicken farmer, family did chicken farming or something. He explained it, and it's been 12 years or so since he explained it to me, but it made sense. Another example, when I was in Kurdistan, I used to chew Big Red chewing gum. You could get them for 25 cents a pack. And you watch right in here. This is where the sound's coming from. I kept it on me. I don't chew gum. I don't eat candy because I just don't want to have the teeth damage. But there were times when we would go for more than a day where we couldn't brush our teeth because we're on mission. So you throw stick a Big Red in. At least your mouth doesn't taste so nasty. The Kurdish people, there was a janitor up there, 17-year-old young man, kid actually, who worked as a janitor in one of our buildings where we stayed when we were up in on the border with Turkey and Syria. They're in northern Iraq, an area called Kurdistan. He offered me $5 for one pack of 25-cent Big Red gum. Well, I gave it to him, of course. I wasn't going to take $5 from him for Big Red gum. And that's the one thing about the Iraqi people I really liked. They didn't think that just because we had more than them, we should just give to them. I've experienced that in other places around the world. I didn't experience that in Iraq. As a matter of fact, the people in Iraq wouldn't take anything from us if we tried to give it to them. That young man, he told me that he would give me $5 for every pack of Big Red I could get to him because he took it to school and sold it for 10. Now, what you got to understand about this is that in the early stages of this war, when we go around, we'd be bombing the terrorist hideouts or whatnot. There were guys that went around in trucks, Humvees. If we destroyed a home, the wrong guy, say, we got the right guys, but we blew up a couple of houses beside them, these guys would jump out of the Humvees with briefcases filled with US dollars and say, here, sorry we blew up your house, see ya. Get back in the truck and going up and bomb the next guy. Well, they were handing over briefcases that had 10,000 US dollars in them, $100 bills, to replace mud huts that were built for free. If you were to buy the materials to build these huts, you might have had 25 US dollars into these huts. So in that part of Kurdistan, northern Iraq, the autonomous Kurdish region, inflation was through the roof. So that's why a 25-cent pack of gum cost $5. The kids that when you first began to hear this story, you thought, wow, they were being taken advantage of with this war profiteering. They were stuffing their pillowcases with $100 bills. I mean, that's kind of an exaggeration, but a cup of Starbucks coffee at one point, or coffee, was $100 US up there. Because that's what happens when you push a huge influx of cash into the economic system. It makes the price of goods and services jump because the cash is there to purchase it. Prices jump to what the market will bear. It's Economics 101. There's clearly something out here with us. I just can't tell exactly where, because I'm hearing movement from two different locations, and this video is not supposed to be about this stuff today. So anyway, there's huge money. There's huge money in war. Last example, and you try to tame it, you can't. KBR. You remember Halliburton, Dick Cheney's company? Well, they got bad rep in the press, so what'd they do? Same thing Philip Morris did when they lost all their lawsuits with cigarette smoking, and the same thing Facebook, you might know it as Facebook, has done just last year when everybody realized they don't care about your privacy. They will sell your information to China if Mark Zuckerberg makes money off of it. They changed their name. Philip Morris changed it to Altria Group, and it works. These things work. Philip Morris stock got beat up because of the lawsuits, which were never paid out. They're still tied up in court. But 2 or 3 years later, people have forgotten that Altria was Philip Morris. Their share price recovered. Facebook changed to Meta. Same thing, hit record highs. It got hammered last week, dropped big time. It's not done dropping. Well, I don't want to say that. I wouldn't consider buying it unless it goes back under $100. I bought it at 80, sold it after. It's up to 230 now. It was at 320. It's still overpriced, and Mark Zuckerberg's day of reckoning, in my humble opinion, is still yet to come. The government might not be willing to do it at this time, which, I do love the free market system. I hate monopolies, but we are seeing that if monopolies are allowed to go unchecked, the free market system itself will step in and make the correction, as they're doing with Meta now. But Halliburton, bad name, bad rep. Everybody knew they were war profiteering, so they start calling it KBR, trying to get it in check. When we would get our laundry laundered on base, we would take all of our dirty clothes in the green Army laundry bags, and we'd take it to the building where here's okay. So the U.S. government would pay KBR something, to make the math simple, and this number's not far off, $100,000 per employee to make sure the laundry was getting done. KBR would take the money, and then they would hire what we referred to as TCNs, third country nationalists. They would go to Pakistan, they would go to Philippines, they would go to countries, third world countries, where people were accustomed to working for maybe $100 a month. Like in the Philippines right now, and I lived there 6 years, my wife's Filipina. The average monthly income in the Philippines is probably $150 a month. That's about 7,500 pesos. Because $1 is 50 pesos. Well, KBR would hire Filipinos, say, hey, we're going to pay you $200 a month. We're going to pay your airfare. We're going to put you up in free housing. You don't have to. They're jumping at it, right? So KBR gets that $100,000 per year for that employee, and they end up paying out maybe $5,000 of it in salary, travel costs and whatnot. They pocket the other $95,000 and call it a profit. Well, the issue with this laundry service is they were charging, it turns out, $125 per bag of laundry. They weren't even using detergent. They were simply boiling our laundry, because they were smart enough to figure out that if you boil the laundry, the temperature of the water will be so hot it will kill any bacteria, anything nasty that gets you sick. Oh yeah, and you save all that money by not having to buy detergent. Okay, but they were told, listen, this is too much. You cannot justify $125 a bag to boil this laundry. So they said, you're not allowed to charge more than $75 a bag. Still big, right? Still big deal. They said, okay. Within 48 hours, there was a new rule for us. We were not allowed to put any more than 25 pieces of garments, of clothing, inside that bag to take to be laundered. A pair of socks, that was 2 pieces. So if you had, let's say, and we usually went over there once a week, let's say you had 3 or 4 ACU uniforms, 6 or 8 pairs of socks. You were easily at 35, 40 articles of clothing. We had to break it up into 2 bags. So now, instead of getting $125 to boil that bag of laundry, KBR was getting 75 plus 75 is $150 to boil the laundry. It was just broken up into 2 different bags. There's no way to beat this system. The system is in place to prosper. However, back to what I originally started with, the fact that 50% of adults in America under 30 are choosing not to participate in this system threatens the system. Now, why are they not participating in the system? Largely because, like I mentioned at the beginning, from the time they were born until now, they've known nothing but a nation at war, a world at war. They have watched their parents go out there and put in, when was the last time anybody only worked 40 hours a week? I put in more than that just doing the stuff I do around here. I write more than that. If you figure the amount of time I put into writing, editing, all these things, they watch their parents put in 60 hours a week or more to never really get ahead and maybe still struggle. So during the days of the Great Recession, '08 to whenever, families contracted. And you, for the first time in American history, started to see multiple generations of families living together because they needed to for financial necessity. There just simply were not a lot of jobs out there. Well, when the jobs did come back, you had a new breed of Americans out there. And I'm going to tell you, you might feel like saying, or even you might even think I'm sitting here insinuating that these young people are lazy, good-for-nothing bums with no work ethic who are taking advantage of their parents. No, not at all. That's not why they're doing it. These are people who, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, have opportunities that this nation hasn't seen in 20 years, but who are finally saying, hey, I'll do this, but on my terms. I go to work for you and you treat me like crap. You treat me like a lesser than, I'm just going to quit. And when you don't have rent to pay, or you don't have a mortgage payment, you don't have overhead, you don't have bills because you're still at home with mom and dad, you have the luxury to do that. Previous generations like myself, Generation X, and the older millennials, people in their mid-30s and beyond, we didn't have that luxury because we were still part of the dynamic that left home at 18, you either went to college, you went to work, or you went to the military, but you certainly didn't stay at home. And there was the stigma associated with that too. You would be embarrassed if you had a 20-year-old son that was at home, not, in college. That stigma's gone, as it rightly should be. If you look at societies around the rest of the world, multiple generations of families have always lived with each other. The middle generation, the people of my age or younger, go out and do the work to earn the money. The grandparents watch the children, so you don't have to pay for childcare and all this stuff, and it works. And all three, the older generation supports the one beneath them, and then they move up and advance in rank, and then the middle generation takes care of the elderly and the younger. And it's just been a system that's worked worldwide, but it's never happened here. It's starting to happen now. So you see these young people, they have options. I think back in my time spent at the post office and the crap job that was, the extensive hours, the way you were treated by management. I had to do it for as long as I did until something else worked out because I had a mortgage. I had utility bills. I had to buy groceries for me, my wife, my son. Gen Z's not in that position. So you poop on them, so to say, they're going to say, bye. Well, again, though, this threatens the system. And the system knows habit. It knows what it's always done in the past to correct itself, to make sure the spokes are doing what they're going to do or what they're supposed to do. And oftentimes throughout history, that has been to get involved in a war, whether we needed to be there or not, whether it was any of our business or not. It's always corrected the system and it's put the spokes back in place. The system is going to find this time around, should it go this route, that it's not going to work. The days of the draft are gone. Hey, my man Muhammad Ali put an end to that crap. They try that, you're going to see a lot of people converting to different religions the next day after their number's called, and they're not going. Now, it's not going to come to that, I don't believe, because we fight with technology more so than manpower, and we will continue to do so as technology and societies, well, I would like to say as societies advance, certainly as technologies advance. But these are going to be some very interesting times we have coming up ahead of us. The system isn't running like it's always run. This threatens the system. There's probably more peace of mind among the spokes inside that wheel. The spokes have pretty much said, hey, we have observed and we see that this is a game that can't be won, so we're not even going to play. These are interesting times coming upon us here, guys and girls. Interesting times. I really do believe things are going to get bad soon. And then they're going to get worse. And then they're going to stay there for a while. See you for more next time.